Good afternoon, guys. Welcome into Sooner Tailgate Show. Today is July 7th, 2023. Thanks, everybody, for jumping in last week. We had a great first show, talking a lot about recruiting, talking a little bit towards the end of the show about softball, showed my top 10 Oklahoma Sooners of all time, and then talked into a little bit of just a little talk about this year's team, 2023 schedule, some players, and things like that. Just general discussion about that. So we're in the midst of what is the biggest lull in sports, specifically locally for Oklahoma and those of you that are big time college football fans, right? So a lot of you, like me, probably get a little bit of kind of a little bit of your weight is occupied by basketball and softball to a certain degree, but now there's really nothing. So we're in the dog days of summer, even though it's not really as bad, weather-wise over the last couple of days. It is the time frame right now. If you guys are like me, it really just feels like it's almost a never-ending wait until football gets started with camp early on in August, and then certainly the season getting started late in August for week 0, and then the first part of September, obviously for week 1. But we're getting closer and closer every week. I think we're probably about 3.5-4 weeks away from spring camp or from fall camp starting. We've got some, if you're in the NFL, we've got some NFL preseason stuff, but and then we'll get fall camp going, and then week 0, I believe, starts August 26th, I believe. So, like I said, for those of you that weren't here last week, welcome in. This is our Sooner Tailgate Show live, episode number 2. We'll continue to go for the most part, schedules change, but we're going to try to do everything that we can to go every single Friday here at 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 Central. So make sure you bookmark this, hit that like, subscribe button. Make sure you smash that notification bell so that you know when we're going live. Specifically, make sure that we'll put something in the communities tab each and every week as well. So I talked about this a little bit earlier, in the communities tab, and then on my Twitter. So make sure that you're following me at JasonRay1. Give you all the good stuff in terms of Oklahoma football, anything Oklahoma sports related. Right now, there's a lot of softball talk going on, and we'll get into that as well. So today, just kind of from an agenda perspective, wanted to talk a little bit about the media preseason Big 12 poll that came out yesterday. I'll talk a little bit about recruiting, just in terms of some of the guys that that Oklahoma's in on, specifically guys that might be making some announcements here early on in the month of July, and then maybe into August, getting some of that stuff wrapped up. So ask any questions that you guys have about any of the recruits, and I'll kind of give you some synopsis of what I'm hearing, what I know, and kind of what I'm able to say in terms of what that looks like. Just so you guys know, I'm very big on not ruining the moment for these kids, whether it be football, whether it be softball, whatever sport it is. Like to allow these kids to to tell their own story, to make their announcement. And so I try not to ruin anything in terms of what that might look like. So we'll talk recruiting, talk about the Big 12 preseason poll, talk a little bit about some of my thoughts in terms of offensive players that might really have a chance to kind of break out this year, among all 3 levels, when you talk about the receiving core, the offensive line, and then kind of the skill positions, running back and quarterback in that nature. So and just kind of where I feel that we are headed into this year for Oklahoma fans. And then we'll take the last little 10-15 minutes to talk some softball. Maybe if we have longer, we'll talk that as well. So want to make sure that this continues to be an Oklahoma football show, but at the end of the day, we can still talk about any Oklahoma sports that you guys want to. So make sure you bring your comments, bring your questions, bring your suggestions, and then we'll continue to talk about that. Also, just wanted to make sure that you guys all know. Make sure you keep tuning in to Mark and Jason Watkins on 11:30 a.m., 12:30 Eastern, 11:30 Central every Wednesday, where they go Oklahoma Sooners Live. And again, if you guys weren't here last week. Really, what we're trying to do here, both on Wednesdays and Fridays, is just an opportunity to supplement our Oklahoma coverage that we have. You guys have been really, really faithful in following along. Even in the sort of the dead period of the year when there's not a whole lot to talk about. So make sure that you're joining in there and joining with me, and then we'll continue to do the post game live this year as we have the last couple of years. But we'll do that. I think we'll do our best to try to get some guests on during this year and take some phone calls and stuff like that once it gets closer to football season. As well, and we'll make this time on Fridays serve as more of a, I would say, more of a kind of a pregame, just to kind of preview the game that week or whatever we might have to talk about. So really, really excited. Like I said, we've got this is the last month until football starts. I think that's exciting. It's always exciting for me. Week 0 when that happens. I know Oklahoma typically doesn't. They never play on week 0. We'll see what that schedule looks like going forward with the expanded playoffs and things like that. But for me, week 0, I don't even really care who's playing. It's football. It's live. I want to watch it. Right. So I've not always been a big NFL fan, but even from that degree, there's NFL. I think the Hall of Fame game is on August 3rd this year, so we're less than a month from actual live footballs being thrown, people hitting each other, analysis happening, all that good stuff. So hope you guys are excited as I am. It's getting ready to get cranked up really, really quickly. So let's talk a little bit about the Big 12 preseason media poll that was just released, I think yesterday. And some surprises, not a ton, but there's some surprises. Texas was overall the number one, the pick to win the conference. They had 41 first place votes. Kansas State was number 2 with 14 first place votes. Oklahoma came in at number 3 with 4. Texas Tech was number 4, also with 4 first place votes, and then you've got TCU, Baylor, Oklahoma State at number 7, UCF at 8, Kansas at 9, Iowa State at 10, BYU at 11, Houston, Cincinnati, and West Virginia to kind of to go through the Big 12. So not completely surprised at Texas. Obviously, everybody knows around here the hype machine is in big time spin this time of the year. So not surprised Texas is the number 1 team coming in because of that reason. And they have been in a position where they've stockpiled a lot of their talent through the last few years. I think Sark is doing a really good job on the recruiting trail, as is BV, but I think Sark is really kind of a year, obviously he's a year ahead of BV just from a tenure perspective, not necessarily in trajectory of the program, but with him being in that 3rd year, 5-7 this first year, 8-5 last year, I think the logical jump is, I think most people within that program and inside of that, inside of those locker room and those that follow that Texas program, the expectation at this point is to continue going like a 10-11 win season for Texas. So and we'll start previewing some of these Big 12 teams as well as we go forward. But a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. Receiving core is going to be solid. I mean, I think the big thing is can they live up to the expectations that they have every single year, over the last 2 decades, it seems like, right? Every year that they, the whole Texas is back moniker. So we'll see if that continues to hold true. I think Kansas State is an interesting pick. Will Howard is a guy that for Kansas State at the quarterback position that's just really just continue to not die. I mean, so to speak, in terms of, I think he's continuously been written off, but he had a pretty good season for Kansas State last year. So we'll see if they can repeat that Big 12 championship. What they did in that Big 12 championship game, and just just a fantastic game between Kansas State and TCU a year ago. and you just wonder what they're able to do in terms of are they able to follow up on that season that they had last year. And then Oklahoma, we'll get into that a lot, but when you look at Oklahoma, how does a team like this bounce back from a 6-7 year, right? And what was just so uncommon around here for season, the worst season from a win-loss record that Oklahoma has had since 1998. So almost 25 years of football where it's not been as bad as it was record-wise. So um, you have to assume that there's going to be a lot of improvement in year two, and I think that's going to be the case in Norman. How much improvement can be made? I think that's the key question, and that's part of the discussion that will continue to go down the line. And then just I'm not going to go through all of the rankings. Texas Tech is at 4, probably I'd have to go back and look. I think that's probably one of the highest preseason rankings that they've had. Really good coach, and Joey McGuire did a lot of good things last year for Texas Tech in that program. I think that they're on the right track. I don't know if they're at a place defensively where they're going to be able to challenge just in terms of being able to win a conference championship, but will be very interesting to watch them and how they play out this year. And then TCU, just to end there in the top 5, and then we'll mention a couple of others. But just from a top 5 perspective, TCU loses a lot off of that team last year that really came out of nowhere. I think most had them pegged in kind of the lower half of the league, and then they make it to a national championship game. Obviously, when the Big 12 regular season wasn't able to finish the job in Arlington against Kansas State, but still went on, to that playoff berth and played really well against Michigan, and kind of ran into the buzzsaw that was Georgia in the national championship game. Oklahoma State at 7. Interestingly enough, they actually got a single first place vote, which was a little ridiculous from my mind. But when you look at that, a team that really was just decimated by the portal. Really, the recruiting wasn't as good as it's been in the past, and they're really relying heavily on Alan Bowman, transfer from Texas Tech, went to Michigan, and then going to Oklahoma State. I'm not sure how the Oklahoma State fans, really feel about a guy that was third string at Michigan and coming over and really probably being their guy at Oklahoma State. I think there's just a lot of holes on this Oklahoma State roster that's not going to allow them to be as good as they've been in the past. So, I can see a very similar record to where they were at last year. I believe they finished 7-6 on the season last year. And then I think it's very interesting to see where the newer blood of the new Big 12 fits. You've got UCF at number 8 overall. You've got BYU at 11. You've got Houston at 12 and Cincinnati at 13. So, I think for those programs, you've got to believe that there's going to be, a little bit of a learning curve, a little bit of a just kind of an adjustment to what a full, 12 game P5 conference schedule looks like, right? So, I think BYU is probably a little bit more accustomed to what they'll see more than the others. So I think it'll be interesting, and that UCF OU game will be very, very intriguing this year with UCF coming to Norman. Obviously, the linkage of Dylan Gabriel coming from there will be a big storyline in the season, and particularly leading up to that game. So let me know your thoughts on some of those, and we'll kind of get into that discussion a little bit more. But let me go to our comments here, and we will talk about that. Hey Matt, where are the recruits at? So I think Matt, I think it's very important, to really talk about this just in terms of exactly what the strategy has always been for BV. The Oklahoma's not going, so it's something that Oklahoma fans really just need to get behind. The fact that Oklahoma is not going to get a lot of recruits early on in the May June time period. He wants to know. BV wants everybody to know that they know that they know that this is where they want to be. So, and they're not taking any more visits. So you'll see a lot. So there's going to be a lot more activity in July and in August. So it started to pick up a little bit in June. You've got a couple more that are going to announce here in July. So I think that's something to look for. I mean, I think you see Williams Nwaneri commit some point in July. From everything that I've heard mid to late July is what you're going to see from him. David Stone's probably more of an August commitment date. I think you've got some. I've heard a little bit that you have Taylor Tatum that could be a mid-July July thing as well. I know he's a 2025 kid, but he's probably going to reclassify. Davon Mitchell is going to announce his, he's going to announce his commitment tomorrow. I believe it's at 3 p.m. tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. I know he's a 2025 kid, but everybody expects him to reclassify for 2024. But we'll see. We'll see where that comes. We'll see how that goes. But there's a lot of guys that will continue that Oklahoma's in on that will continue to make those announcements and go as far as that goes. So thanks for the question. So Craig came in with Turnipseed leaving. Where do things stand with the football facilities and stadium renovations? Tough hit. Hopes. Yeah, I think that's been talked a lot about, Craig. I think there's been a lot of there's been a lot of concern with his resignation in terms of what was behind that. But I think he came here and did exactly what he was supposed to do, right? Part of what it was is Oklahoma was in a really good spot in some of their facilities, right? But they were also really behind in some other areas, specifically from a football facility perspective, in terms of not necessarily stadium, not necessarily locker room, but like coach's office and just the amenities that some of these kids look for and like. So 107, he got that $175 million improvement approved. I know some of you guys have seen some of the that YouTube video. I think you guys have seen some of the ideas of what that layout might look like. So yeah, no, I don't think there's anything to be concerned about. I think that's still rolling, going to roll on, and it's going to be one of the nicest facilities in the country once it's all said and done. Right. So, Matt, again, I think I talked about that a little bit. I think a lot of time you can't win with just 3 stars, but once you have 3 and 4 and 5 stars, like littered in there, you have to trust the evaluation on what some of these guys have been able to do. Specifically, I don't want I just don't want the 3-star U moniker to continue to have breath, so to speak. So I think if you look at some guys that Oklahoma isn't in on, even though they're 3-star guys now, that evaluation period and that senior season will allow some of those kids to jump up from time to time. So don't be too worried about that. I think Oklahoma's in a really good spot with Nwaneri, in a really good spot with David Stone, really good spot with Tatum. So I think those, when you look at those 3, if Oklahoma's able to land all 3 of those are 3 5-star kids. So the big names will continue to come, I think, and so those will. I don't think there's a lot of areas of concern for where Oklahoma's at in recruiting. I mean, just think about it, guys, on where Oklahoma was last year in terms of what their win-loss record was and still was able to land the number 4 ranked recruiting class in the country composite wise. I think that was so I think if this season goes like I think many of us think that it will, I think that will continue to bode well for recruiting. And with some of these kids, there's going to be some kids that are going to see how Oklahoma does, right? How Oklahoma, from a win-loss record, what the improvement is on the defensive side of the ball, how Oklahoma does Oklahoma get back to where they have been in the past, 9, 10, 11 wins very consistently. And I think with the schedule that it sets Oklahoma up for the ability to get there. But I don't see any cause for concern from a recruiting perspective at this point. Now, if it gets to the point, if we lose Stone, if we lose Nwaneri, Tatum doesn't end up coming, then I think we can kind of reevaluate that and see where Oklahoma is from a recruiting perspective for this 2024 class. But I think right now there's a lot of momentum and would not expect anything bad in terms of that. Jimmy, I think Javante Barnes or Sawchuk will be all Big 12 players at the end of the year. Yeah. So Jimmy, I think that's interesting. Yeah. When you look at that, I do believe, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. I do believe that you're going to see a little bit of a slight change in philosophy this year from an offensive perspective. I think last year this team went. I mean, and this is Levy's moniker, to go fast and play extremely fast. And I think they'll do that at times, but I think they'll play a little bit more ball control this year than maybe they did last year, and maybe more than Levy's done, in his career. Now I may be wrong on that, but I think I see that because of a couple of things. I think the running back room is very, very strong, very deep, has an opportunity. They're young and to a certain degree a little bit inexperienced, but you've got a lot of kids that really have the ability to be to be game changers on this offense. When you think of Javante Barnes, Gavin Sawchuk, Marcus Major, Tawi Walker, you've got some guys that have the opportunity to be to be really good. And so in that offensive line, if that offensive line it ends up being better, which I do think that they have a good opportunity to be better in 2023, then it'll pave the way. So I think they'll lend to more of their personnel, maybe to a greater degree than what they have in the past. Let's see here. Going through some of the questions. Okie Trace, we have multiple 300+ guys that played well from transfer portal on the D line. This boosts everything. Linebacker play, cornerback play, which will give confidence to the two offense 11-1. Yeah, good comment here. Okay, yeah, no, I think you're spot on with this. I think you really like you really like the pieces that you've got from the portal in certain areas. I think on the offensive side of the ball, the receivers. You've got Andrell Anthony that I think has an opportunity to be one of those guys that can take the top off the defense. A little bit. You've got Brandon Thompson, who is another speed guy as well. I think between him, Thompson and Jaquays Petaway, I think one or more of the three of those end up being one of our big threats in terms of getting the ball down the field very consistently, right? But just to your point here on the defensive side of the ball, yeah, I think you've got two or three guys that are really going to be what I think will be a big improvement over what we've seen over the last couple of years. I think the junior college, I think the transfer from Tennessee to John Terry will end up being, I think he'll end up being a starter in the middle. I've heard nothing but really, really good things about Grayson Halton. I think he's a guy that has the ability and will get the opportunity to compete for that job, and I think he has an opportunity to play a lot this year. You've got Rondell Bothroyd that I think even BB said he was their best defensive lineman in the spring. Certainly with the time that he's had at Wake Forest, absolutely agree that he does have the opportunity to be a really, really good defensive quarterback pressure guy for Oklahoma that they really didn't get a lot of last year. Ethan Downs is the only all Big 12 guy. I wonder, what that competitive balance looks like for him on the end. I mean, Trace Ford, if he's able to stay healthy, I think he's going to be a dynamic player for this defense. So I think you've got a lot more playmakers on the defensive line than you have in the past last year. And I think that kind of your point, Oki, here is that the defensive line really kind of controls the success or maybe lack thereof of the entire defense. And you're absolutely right with that. When you have the ability to really not get pushed around up front, when you have the ability to put some pressure on the quarterback, and that's BV's style. Like, he is very, very aggressive, and he's going to do what he's going to do what he does, right? And so you have seen historically through the years that his first year, his defenses haven't been great, but year two, and then especially year three, they start to take off. So, I think in my mind, for Oklahoma to have the season that they want and that they need, whether it's I think this team needs to have a 9-win plus season with the schedule that they have. So if Oklahoma can get to 9 to 10 wins, I think the defense is going to play a big role in that. I think you're looking at a team that's got to be a top 60 overall defense in the country. Now, if you get anything better than that, I think that's just icing on the cake. Can this team get to a top 30 defense? Sure. It's very difficult to go from 122nd to 30. So I think you take the little wins that you can. But I think they've been able, and okay, this is really kind of a long comment to your point here, that Oklahoma has been able to make considerable jumps from the transfer portal or from freshmen that's been able to come in that will be able to impact this team at all levels of the defense. Whether you talk about Connor Neal coming in from a linebacker perspective, you talk about the freshman in the back end of the defense. Peyton Bowen's a guy that's going to play a lot. Josiah Wagner's a guy that's going to play a lot. Makari Vickers, could enter into that fold from a depth perspective and things like that. So you've got a lot of you got Reggie Pearson as well. That's going to enter into that fold. You've got Deshaun McCullough as well. That's going to enter into that from a Cheetah perspective. So I think you've got a lot more. I think the biggest part, and I've said this a lot throughout the spring, and I'll continue to say this through the fall. You've got a lot more. I think you've got a lot more competitive balance among the team. Right. I think last year you were in a situation where you really just did not have. I think a lot of kids knew that they were going to get to play because there was not a lot of, solid competition behind them. So once you see that continue to kind of manifest itself over and over again, when you have that, you're being pushed in practice, you're being pushed in the games, and and competition is there, and iron sharpens iron. So I think you're going to see improvement over a defense, if nothing else, just because there's kids that are always going to be looking over their shoulder from the aspect of they really need to get better and improve and be the best of what they are each and every day, each and every time that they go out there. So good comment here, Oki. Hey, Mark. Yep, I will. And I think this is probably while I was doing my opening, but yeah, absolutely. We will continue to answer a lot of those questions that you have. So bring any questions, comments that you have, whether it be about recruiting, whether it be about an individual player, a unit on the team, or anything like that. We'll continue to go through that. Jimmy, what are our chances with McKinley? I think when you look at Dominic McKinley, I think he is at this point. I think he's very, very strong to LSU. Now, I think Oklahoma can get in the mix with him. I know that that early on in the summer, I know that there were some kids kind of working on him when he was here, for the barbecue. But I think right now, I would say that he's still LSU's until something changes to make him want to go somewhere else. But I know the staff is still working on him at this point, so I would be surprised if any of that changes. But right now, I think that Oklahoma's still working. But we'll see. LSU's is the clear favorite here. So let's go into depth in some of these other recruits that we can talk through here. We talked a little bit about Williams Nwaneri. From everything I've heard, Georgia is looking. He's looking at him. They're really, really, I think, doing everything that they can to get him to go to Georgia right now, even though that they've got a really big defensive lineman class already that they've built, um, especially with Ajanye that just announced to them yesterday. So I think the thing that you like with Oklahoma and Nwaneri, he visited Georgia last week, and no one flipped the commitment. No one, in terms of a crystal ball, no one switched that. He's still I still like where Oklahoma is with him. Now it's maybe gotten a little bit closer, but I think there's not been enough that's happened with that recruitment to lead me to believe that he's going elsewhere. Right. So I think he's still. I think you feel strong about where he's at. With Oklahoma, I think you continue to look. Obviously, you look at some of the tea leaves in terms of him. If he continues to be pro Oklahoma and everything that he says and does, I think that's still a good chance that he lands in Norman. And again, with this now, I mean, all is not lost if he does end up going to Georgia. But now what you have to realize if you've really followed recruiting and know about how good this kid is, the best defensive lineman in the country, 5-star, top 5 overall player in the country. If Oklahoma lands him, it's been a while since Oklahoma's landed a couple of kids as good as what they look like they might be landing with Nwaneri and maybe Stone and even Nigel Smith from that perspective. But those are the 3 kids from the defensive line area that I would be watching out for Oklahoma. Like I said, I think probably a somewhere between mid to late July announcement for Nwaneri is very possible. For him, I think I think when you look at that. David Stone is probably August. I think he's a guy that, I think a lot of people around here have been talking about that a lot. Really just in terms of over the last couple of years, he's an in-state guy, and he's been in Oklahoma lean and very pro Oklahoma over the last couple of years. Gerald McCoy is really kind of took him under his wings from a certain degree in terms of, what he's talking through. And so I think when you look at that, I think I heard the other day that he's actually visited unofficial like almost over 40 or 50 times in the last 3 years. So I think, and it's nowhere near in the bag or anything, but I think I would still be surprised if Stone did not come to Oklahoma. And again, depending who you talk to, Stone is a top 5, top 6, definitely top 10 guy overall. One of the best defensive linemen in the country as well. Taylor Tatum is another one. I said 5-star earlier. I think he's a 4-star guy right now. Number 1 ranked running back in the country. This is by all recruiting services and everything I've heard, this is kind of an OU and USC deal. I think there's a possibility that he could maybe even announce I've heard some July 15th dates out there. So watch for him. I think Oklahoma had made just an astronomical impression on him before the barbecue. I think before the barbecue, I think he was very, very, very heavy USC. I think Oklahoma has been able to I think they've been able to sway him based a lot on what Skip Johnson has done, the Oklahoma baseball coach, in terms of because he's a dual sport athlete, in terms of what he's going to be able to do. So I like where Oklahoma is with him. I still like where Oklahoma is with Caden Durham, another running back in the cycle. I think I don't think either one of those kids will shy away from one another. Um, Terry Bussey is another guy to keep an eye on. I think right now he's probably where he's at is he's um, I think he's probably A&M, pretty strong A&M, but Oklahoma's there. Um, another guy that we talked about Nigel Smith. When you're going to go to the offensive line, you've got Grant Bricks. I think it's Nebraska, Kansas State, Oklahoma. I think there's if you've watched a little bit of Parker and Brandon Drum, they talked a lot about all three of these teams that are really recruiting him on different things, right? There's different pitches. I think Oklahoma's in a much better spot to come win a Big 12 championship, going to the SEC, things like that. So he's a big time. I think he's the biggest one. Now you got Casey Poe. I think he's probably, from everything I'm hearing, he's probably Alabama. But Oklahoma's still in the mix there. When you look at that wide receiver, we've talked a little bit about that. Not a ton. Zion Raggins is another guy to keep an eye on. Depends on how many Oklahoma's going to take. I think in this cycle, anywhere from 4 to 5. I think if Bussey's not going to be a guy that's probably going to commit until probably the November, December timeframe. So I wouldn't look for that to be something that happens obviously here in the summer, unless Oklahoma's just able to wow him, I should say. Those are some of the ones that I'm aware of. So Jamie question here, what linebackers are we in on? Really the biggest one is Michael Boganowski. And I don't know where Oklahoma stands with him. I don't think it's going to end up being Oklahoma, but you just have to remember that Oklahoma has tons and tons of bodies and depth in that linebacker room right now. So the linebacker area, I think, is a heavy concern in this 24 class, but he's the one guy. But I'll do some more. If there's any other guys that Oklahoma ends up being in terms of a backup plan at the linebacker position, I'll look into that a little bit more, and we'll talk more about that. Another question in here, saved by grace. Do you think Arnold could take Dylan Gabriel's spot before the end of the season? I think where you're at with this, Grace, is that and I know, Jackson Arnold is going to be the biggest. I think he's going to be the backup quarterback's always the biggest name, right? Everybody loves the backup guy. But I think at the end of the day, Dylan Gabriel knows this offense more than anyone other than Levy. I think you lose so much going from Dylan Gabriel to Jackson Arnold, just in terms of knowing the offense, in terms of experience and things like that. So I think if you're in a situation where Jackson Arnold has taken over for Dylan Gabriel, this is probably a situation where it's an injury or the season has not gone well at all. So I think those are the two items. So now Jackson Arnold is probably he's going to be the guy next year without a doubt. But I think this year, I think it's Dylan Gabriel's spot. Would be surprised if something different happens. In terms of that. So yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, I think this is a different scenario with Caleb Williams and Spencer Rattler. I think the scenario with Spencer Rattler was that, when he kind of got booed a couple of times, and there was a couple of times where, they called for Caleb. And I think the difference here was that a lot of people saw that, from a student perspective, and then people on the team saw the fact that Spencer wasn't really doing the things that he needed to do to be just off the field, to be the quarterback for this team now. And so I don't think that's the case. I'm sorry, let me say this again. I don't think that's the case with Dylan Gabriel here. So fully expect him, but he has his limitations, right? Like all people, like all quarterbacks do. Listen to Mark and a little listen to Mark and Jason Watkins a little bit when they were breaking down the quarterbacks together. So go back and watch that if you if you missed that. But um, I think Dylan Gabriel agree with the assessment there. Gabriel is a top three quarterback in the Big 12, right? I mean, I think it starts with Jalen Daniels. I think so you can put him in that group as well. So I think it'll be very very interesting to see um, to see where he ends up. He's really good outside the numbers. He has some mobility. I think they'll put him in a little bit more RPO stuff this year than they did last year. I think he'll be willing to take some more chances than he did last year because if he does get hurt, Oklahoma does have a very, very capable backup in Arnold. But I just don't see it being at this point anything that would necessarily unseat Dylan Gabriel. But we've seen this happen before, so I'm not saying it's out of the realm of possibility, but not something that I certainly I'm thinking or expecting. Lucas James right now we're lacking in big defensive commitments. I just talked about that a little bit, so just wait. Just wait. I think this is July and August, so we'll start seeing some more. Would anything less than 10 wins be a failure this year with a soft schedule? I don't know that I would say 10. I would say 7 or 8 wins would be a failure. And I don't know that I would even say it would be a failure. I would say it's another underachieving season. You come out of this schedule going 7-5 and 8-4. I think specifically 7-5, 8-4. I would feel the same way on, just in terms of what the schedule looks like and going to what the flip side of the schedule is going to look like in the following year, right? With going into the SEC for the first year. So in my mind, I think if you get to 9 wins, like it's a solid season. I think it's a good season. It's not anything bad. I think if you end up this season 9-3, you're going down the trajectory of, okay, we went 6-7, then we're looking at 9-3, depending on what happens in the bowl, 9-4, 10-3 scenario. I think you like where C. So I would put the line in the sand on 9. Now I've said this before. I hate going ceilings and I hate going floors, because floors and ceilings, for that matter, don't really account for injuries and situations that you don't expect, right? If you get a couple of 4 or 5 really really big injuries to areas where you can't really afford injuries, I think that's your floor could be lower than you ever imagined it being. But I think 9 wins, I think, is the line in the sand. Below 9 wins, I think it's a little bit of a disappointment. 9 or above, if you're 10, 11 wins and you're fighting for a chance to win a Big 12 championship, or in the Big 12 championship game, and then you're able to make it to maybe a New Year's Six bowl, I think that is a solid improvement, and something that you should be happy about going into the SEC. Cole Satterfield, all these Bama QBs who wait to get their chance pays off. JA should wait and learn. Yeah, I mean, I think we live in. Thanks for the comment here, Cole. I think we live in a society, specifically sports related, where if I'm not playing early on, I'm not going to wait my turn. I'm going to take my ball and go home, so to speak, right? So I think, just in terms of that comment, Cole, I mean, I think some of these kids aren't going to have an opportunity to play right away. And they wait their turn, but some of these kids aren't going to wait more than a year or two. I think about a year, especially the highly recruited players. So, but I think that's the idea for this year. Cole, is for this team to be very successful. Jackson Arnold get an opportunity to learn, get an opportunity to play, whether it's a red shirt situation or not, getting an opportunity to get some playing time in some of these games from time to time, whether it be, in garbage time situation or what the situation may be, just getting him some time, I think, on the on this team through some of these games this year will be very opportunistic for the team, and just get him that just so he's ready to go next year. Hey, thanks for that. I appreciate that. Thanks for the comment, and thanks for joining in. Okay, I know you've been here through on Fridays. I know you've been faithful on Wednesdays as well. Thanks for joining, and please feel free to have any comment, any question at all, anytime, brother. I appreciate you. Bishop Frank, what are your thoughts on how many years until Cincinnati? Okay, this is a good question. This was any of you that catch Teddy and Gabe. They talked about this a little bit. I think when last year Teddy predicted that Oklahoma would win a national championship within 3 years when BV was hired. I believe it was. So I think, and I agree with Teddy a lot. Obviously, he knows much more about this than I do. I agree with him when he had kind of said that, the 6 and 7 season this past year might have changed the timeline a little bit. So, I think it's hard to answer that question right now, Bishop. I think if you halfway through the season, let's see what this team looks like this year, and that might help me answer that question a little bit more. I think you have to. I know this is not what people really necessarily want to hear and love to hear. You've got to expect a little bit of growing pains going into the SEC for a year or two. So I think conventional wisdom says if you're going to win one, if you're going to challenge for one in the next couple of years, like this is probably the year, right? Because this team could be better, but the schedule will be tougher in 2024. I think the one thing that helps is the playoff expansion from 4 to 12 next year. I think that helps from a scheduling perspective in terms of knowing, that you have a tougher schedule, but a 9-3 or a 10-2 may get you a spot in the expanded college football playoffs. So, it's hard. Let's revisit this. Come back to me after Texas this year, and let's talk about that again. Saved by Grace. Thanks, brother, for the feedback. And yeah, it's really good stuff. So make sure you check that out. Just another plug for what the good stuff that Mark, really good stuff that Mark and Jason are doing on Wednesday afternoons as well. Lucas, besides the D line, what other big commits from different positions on defense? That we're in on. Talked a little bit about the, as you mentioned, the defensive line. I think the defensive line is the biggest area of, I don't know if concern is the right word to use, but I think the area that they're targeting, I think the highest, right? We talked about Boganowski, the linebacker. He's a guy that they're in on. Devon Jordan, who's a local Tulsa Union kid from the secondary. I think he's a guy that Oklahoma is really high on, and there's a lot of mutual respect. Danny Okoye is another kid. He's from NOAA, a local homeschool here in the Tulsa area. I think he's a guy that, again, from what I understand, he's going to be at the party at the Palace, and then from what I understand, also he will end up being a guy that probably doesn't announce until late. So if Oklahoma has a 9-10 win season on the back burners of what we talked about a little bit ago, I think he is a guy that Oklahoma will be in on from an edge. Umazula is another guy, another edge kid that Oklahoma's in on, big time 4-star kid that Oklahoma is in a really good position for as well. So those are some of the other guys outside of the defensive line that Oklahoma's in on right now. I completely forgot from a secondary. Mikhail Patterson McDonald here from locally from Oklahoma as well. I think he's another guy um, to look out for. I think he's going to announce his commitment. I believe it's the end of July, July 31st. I believe somewhere in that neighborhood that he will announce that commitment to where he's going. And Oklahoma's in a really really good spot for him. 12 wins are probably going to happen with his schedule, and beat Texas in the championship. Now, wouldn't that be sweet? 12 wins and beating Texas for the championship. That would be a wonderful, wonderful storybook season, much like a few years ago. Hopefully, that doesn't count a loss to Texas in the regular season, but I think everybody would allow or would be okay with a loss to Texas in the Red River rivalry there early on in October, and exchange that for a win in the Big 12 championship game. I think that would be great. I just think, and I'm not one of those that necessarily wants to support Texas and anything. I don't necessarily. I don't want them to always just fail. It doesn't really matter, a whole lot when they're not playing Oklahoma. But I think it would be a little bit cool to see OU and Texas play in the Big 12 championship game in the last year of the Big 12, because that's not what anyone in the Big 12 wants to see, without a doubt. I feel like OU will shock some people this year. Absolutely, absolutely. So I think you're right. I think this team, I think anywhere from 9 to 10 wins is, I think, where they're at. If you get to 10, I think you have a great chance to play in that conference championship game. So we only have about 10 minutes. I may end up going a little bit longer today because we've got a lot of good questions and a lot of good feedback. So we've got two little things that I wanted to kind of get to left and talk a little bit about some of my guys that I think that are going to be difference makers on this offense. I think when you look at the offensive line, I think at first glance you're a little bit concerned with some of the guys that that Oklahoma lost, but I think Walter Rouse coming over. I think he'll be a guy that will help kind of solidify that left tackle position. Savion Byrd, if he can kind of get his weight where it needs to be, I like where he's at as well. And I think some of those parts will come together. I think that Oklahoma needs the offensive line. I think they need him to be really really good. Gosh, you guys help me in the comments here. The transfer from TCU, his name is absolutely escaping me at the worst time. Played a lot sparingly last year, but then started in the bowl game. Gosh, his name is escaping me. I don't know. He's going to be. I think he has an opportunity to be a really really good one. So forgive my embarrassment of forgetting his name at the time. But someone tell me in the comments if you remember, and I'll show it here. But then when you look at the running back, we talked a little bit about the running back. I think you've got a lot of good guys in there that have an opportunity to be big time. I think Gavin Sawchuk has an incredible ceiling. Javonte Barnes. Yes, Guyton. Yes, thank you. For whatever reason, I couldn't remember. I think he's a guy on the right side that he played really well in that bowl game, playing against one of the best defensive linemen in the country last year, and Jared Verse from Florida State. So yeah, I think he has a chance to be big time for Oklahoma this year. And then I think that the Javonte Barnes, Gavin Sawchuk, if Marcus Major can stay healthy, I think he kind of fills a void, that kind of Trey Sermon's closer role that was successful for Oklahoma that year. I think he has the ability to do that. Key for him is being able to stay healthy. Can he stay healthy from that perspective? And then I think that probably the biggest question mark within I would say two question marks within this group. What the depth at the tight end position is a little bit concerning. For one, I think from everything that I've seen and heard, that Stogner is bigger, faster than he was when he was here a couple of years ago. Even though he didn't get a ton of targets and get a ton of catches there in that offense at South Carolina, I think you look at the opportunity that they have that Stogner has to be the tight, be the tight end with not a lot of depth behind him, especially from a pass catcher perspective. So, but then again, I think the biggest question mark really is Oklahoma going to have some receivers that's going to step up? And Brian, specifically to your comment, I hear some good things about Gibson in the offseason. Of course, I heard a lot of these last year. So, a lot of these kids that are younger, it's their second year. I think it's just time for them to do it, right? You've got Gibson, you've got Nick Anderson, and then you've got a lot of young pieces. I think you need Jalil Farouk to solidify himself as one of the best, the number one wide receiver on this team. Take that role, take the reins of that role, right? I think so. If that comes into to play, then you've got some more. You got some other guys. You've got Gavin Freeman, Drake Stoops that are more of that. Gavin Freeman's a little bit quicker, right? But you've got that kind of those guys that will be able to kind of go through the middle of the field from time to time. Be the guys that you can kind of the term is possession receiver for them, and then you have some playmakers on the outside that can stretch the defense. I'm really, really excited about Jaquays Petaway and what he's going to be able to bring to the table for Oklahoma from a wide receiver perspective. In terms of kind of taking the top off, you've got Brendan Thompson. We mentioned Andrell Anthony. So you've got some guys collectively about, you got 7 or 8 guys that really has the opportunity to, to do it, but it's just they've got to be able to do it. So I think that's one of the biggest question marks. I think for this offense is that guy stepping up as well. So and then the last thing I kind of wanted to talk, and feel free in between here, give your kind of some questions, and we're going to move to. We're going to kind of end this with a little bit of softball portal talk. So, a lot of you guys that follow softball, specifically Oklahoma softball, Oklahoma's got a couple of commitments over the last couple of days. And then we had the big time announcement. Kelly Maxwell from Oklahoma State, who was the ace and probably one of the top 5 pitchers in the country, hit the portal yesterday. That announcement came yesterday, late last night, and it's been solidified from Maxwell as well. So Oklahoma, Peyton Monticelli committed to Oklahoma. Wisconsin pitcher, a true freshman last year, pitched about 80 innings, 2.71 ERA. I think she has a lot of she has a lot of she throws fast, a lot of rise ball, good change. And I think she throws in the 71, 72 mile an hour. So I think that was a little bit of a depth pull, a young depth pull that Oklahoma needs. Nicole May, being a senior, will be her last year. Kirsten Deal will probably, I think, steps into one of those roles for Oklahoma this year, just in terms of being, an ace or maybe a number 2. I think Oklahoma adds another pitcher. Whether that be, I think Oklahoma is very firmly in the position, in the conversation with Kelly Maxwell from what I'm hearing. Elena Vaughter, the transfer from Stanford. Again, I think Oklahoma's in the mix there. Carly Keeney, who is a graduate transfer pitcher from Liberty. I think all 3 of those Oklahoma's really kind of in the mix on just in the conversation, right? I think Oklahoma's going to add 1. They're not going to add multiple. But I think you've got from things that I've heard, there was a lot of rumors about Maxwell potentially jumping into the portal around the Women's College World Series time. Didn't happen, but grad transfers actually can hit that portal anytime. There's no date requirement for that. So I think it'll be interesting. I think when you look at some of these big 3 from a pitcher perspective, you've got Oklahoma, You've got Florida State, you've got UCLA. Those are the three teams that are kind of firmly in the mix to, in terms of top contenders, to add another arm. I think Florida State gets one of them. I think Oklahoma gets one of them, and then I think it'll be interesting to see, where one of the other ones, Carly Keeney. I think early on the conventional wisdom is she was potentially a a young lady that was probably going to commit to Tennessee early on, but she hasn't committed. Kind of get the feeling she's waiting to see kind of what happens with some of these bigger names. And I think there's going to be lots of rumors that are rampant on social media about Vaughter, about Kelly Maxwell, and where each one of those girls land. It's going to be a week or so, I think, before we hear anything really credible in terms of where either one of those are going. Kelly Maxwell is playing for Team USA in Ireland right now, so she's there. I think they got there. They might have got there yesterday or the day before. So I think the good thing is she's playing with Kinsey Hansen. She's playing with Tiare. She's played with a lot of these young ladies that are really big from the Oklahoma perspective. I think Kinsey Hansen even kind of shared her Instagram story today, which was of Kelly Maxwell. So there's a lot of it's a little bit different than football. A lot of these young ladies, they play travel ball together, and so they're very close. So they're very friendly with one another. So I think for me, it's always interesting in some of these grad transfers is what do they want to accomplish in their extra season. In most of these are these extra COVID seasons, right? Do they want a chance to win a championship? Do they want a chance to play with some of their friends? Do they want a chance to is the graduate program the most important thing? What's the most important thing for some of these kids? And so I think the Kelly Maxwell thing is interesting. From what I understand, she wants to be part of a staff. She wants to be part of a team that really kind of values what she's able to do, as an individual on and off the team, as opposed to just being a pitcher. Maybe there was a little bit of overwork there over the last few years. So I think it'll be very intriguing to see what she ends up doing. I think UCLA is probably the most desperate for an arm, I think, at this point, but I don't know that they're really legitimately in the conversation for any of the three that I'd mentioned. So it's really intriguing coming from UCLA as one of the blue bloods in the college softball world that really maybe a little bit on the outside looking in on a couple of these arms. But it'll be very interesting. And the other one outside of the pitching area is Taryn Kern, Indiana, true freshman transfer. Just a phenomenal season, freshman of the year in the Big Ten. She hit the portal, and I think she's been widely known as one of, if not the biggest offensive, the best bat, the best hitting player in the country to hit the portal. Hit over 400 as a true freshman at Indiana. Had like 22 home runs, 68 RBIs. I think the one knock on her is defensively. She committed over 20 errors last year, but very, very hot commodity. OU, Florida State, Stanford, Washington. I think her recruitment's been very, very interesting. I think she's just a young lady that's not quite sure where she wants to be. I think she had her mind made up that she wanted to probably go back. She's from California, so she wanted to go back to the West Coast, whether it be Stanford or Washington, were the two names that I kind of consistently heard on her. Now, I think Oklahoma got into the mix. I don't think she necessarily expected Oklahoma to have the level of interest that they did have. But they did, so I think Oklahoma's in the mix. It's really hard to tell who leads for her. I think it's for some of you guys that were around, and I said this to a couple of people that follow both Oklahoma football and softball. I very much look at the recruitment of Taryn Kern for Oklahoma very much like Switzer in his recruiting in the 70s and 80s before the scholarship limit was there, right? I think there was a lot of the Switzer wanted to grab this kid because know that maybe not necessarily he was going to be a game changer for him, or maybe not even play a lot or start, but he wanted to get him so no one else could have him. I think there's a little bit of an element of this with Patty Gasso and Oklahoma softball related to the recruitment of Kern. Kern's not a person that Oklahoma needs, but for a team like Washington, a team like Stanford, they need her. I mean, I think she's going to be an instant starter at second base. Absolutely a person that is going to play and start and have a big role immediately. Right now with Oklahoma, she's a good enough bat that she'd probably be in the lineup. I don't know. I mean, she's not a good enough defender. She's probably not gonna take an infield spot, so she may end up being a DP or an outfielder for Oklahoma. So, but I think I equate it to that. So if Oklahoma doesn't get Kern, it's not too big of a deal. I feel I would say probably 60%. I would say I would lean towards that. 60% she's in a Sooner, but her recruitment's been wild. And I hope I haven't misspoke. I haven't checked social media while I've been on here for the last hour, so I don't know if that's still the case. But I think keep an eye on an arm. I think between Carly Keeney, Kelly Maxwell, and Elena Vaughter, OU is going to get one of those. I think they like what they've had last year in terms of a staff. And I think that's something that a couple of these, I think all three of these young ladies are looking for, particularly Maxwell. I know specifically that's something that she is really looking for, to be part of a staff and not necessarily be relied upon. So if you're Oklahoma, remember last year, Oklahoma had four girls that pitched a decent amount. I mean, you've got the big three. You had the big three of Jordy Ball, Nicole May, Alex Storako that threw a lot of innings. But then you had Kirsten Neal that pitched in some really big moments for Oklahoma. Pitched a little bit in the in the Women's College World Series. Had pitched, had two really big moments for her this past year in the Oklahoma State game where Oklahoma made the comeback late in that game. I think that was certainly a big moment for her there, and showed that she's ready and she can go do that. She got an out, and then Oklahoma took the lead, and then she had 3 up, 3 down the very next inning. And I think then you look at a guy or a young a situation where, against Clemson, she did walk in a run, her first. But then she shut them down right after that and put Oklahoma in a position for that to still be a game and for them to go. So I think those two things that she's added this year, I think are really big keys in terms of what her development might look like next year. So that's just a little bit of, and we'll get into this a little bit more and more each week, but a little bit of softball portal talk, specifically as it relates to Oklahoma. And Oklahoma got a little bit of a depth pull from a catcher perspective with Riley Ludlow last week or a couple of days ago. Catcher from Furman, good stats. I think she'll be a backup to Kinsey Hansen, so she doesn't have to catch every game. And I think she's very formidable. I think if I remember the stats, she had 372, 10 home runs, 41 RBIs. It's a lesser conference, but she's not going to be asked to be a starter. She's not going to be asked to be to carry the weight. So I think that's a really good pickup for Oklahoma, just to get some quality depth there. So really good add. So would expect 1 to 2 possible more. I think an arm is what they will get for sure. If Kern comes, they won't say no. I think they'll add her, but I wouldn't see anybody else that's in the fold, I think, to add, because you've got a couple of really good freshmen. Got 4 freshmen actually coming in. I think there's 2 that really are going to push for playing time. Ella Parker and Cassidy Pickering are 2 that I would anticipate that get an opportunity to challenge for a spot, whether that be maybe a corner infield spot or an outfield spot or just a DP spot. But Patty will do a good job of getting both of those some at bats and things like that. So I think I know that we're all football in the fall, but I think the fall battle series that they had last year, and some sort of it will be very interesting, right? Just to see In a lot of ways, the competition at shortstop, I think, is going to be very interesting to watch. I think you're going to have 3 or 4 young ladies that are in the mix for that, and see what that, see what that might look like for them. Do you see Avery Hodge? Does she have the bat to be an everyday shortstop right now for this team? Do you see someone like potentially Alyssa Brito moving over from third to short? Then what does that do with Alina Torres? She has the ability to play third. There's some talk about TRA Jennings potentially. I think she probably stays at second. She's just so valuable at second base. One of the best second basemen in the country, defensively as well as what she does at the plate, obviously, which most people know. So, and then the pitchers, and then some of those freshmen. So that'll be very interesting. We'll talk about that as it continues to go. So, I know I'm a little bit past our hour, but I want to thank everybody for coming in. I think we had at one point had 52 in here on a Friday afternoon. So please continue to like, share, get that out there. I'll continue to put this on I'll continue to tweet this out. We're going to go live each and every Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central. Obviously, we're going to be heavy football, but we'll still sneak in some other stuff from time to time, whether it be basketball, baseball, softball, anything Sooner related. We'll talk about it here, right? Especially if it's really newsworthy and things that are really going on. So make sure you guys tune in, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so that you know when we go live, if we have a schedule change and what we need to do, and also remember. Make sure that you guys join Mark and Jason Watkins every Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. Central, 12:30 Eastern, for that weekly Oklahoma Sooners Live. And they're going to continue to break down positions each and every week, kind of leading into that. So we'll make sure that we kind of deviate some of the content, so we're not doing some of the same things that they're doing in a repeat, and make this look a little bit different, just in terms of what you hear in the content as well. So make sure you do that. Make sure you please follow me at Jason Ray 1. I know that there's Threads going on, this new social media platform, but if that ends up going there, we'll switch it over. But yeah, I'm really active on Twitter at Jason Ray 1, so come follow me. I'll definitely give you a follow back. Okay. I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend, and come back next week for more Sooner content. I got a little bit of grief on this on the comments, so I'm not going to say Boomer Sooners. It's a Boomer Sooner. So a Boomer Sooner, and God bless.